Exactly what is President Trump doing in that building behind you right now?
David, President Trump is facing a heavy security presence behind me surrounding Trump Tower, where he is inside having a series of meetings. Now, later this afternoon, President Trump will have an infrastructure meeting. I'm told by the White House that this essentially will be an executive action of some sorts, instructing folks to essentially look at the permitting process for infrastructure projects and to provide disciplinary action should there be any environmental issues with the infrastructure licensing process. No details at this point have been released, but there's no question, David, that the fallout from the president's response to the tragedy in Charlottesville over the weekend continues to dominate the political discussion surrounding this administration. I've spoken with several political consultants who talk frequently with the White House, and all of them are frustrated at the lack of communication strategy coming out of this. The fourth CEO on the President's Manufacturing Council board has now resigned, and all of that comes with three of them resigning after the president addressed these comments at the White House yesterday. But I can also tell you that several of these sources that I've spoken with who deal frequently with the White House think that this will blow over. But in the business world, essentially the bottom line coming from the business community is that the risk of doing business with this president is too high, and essentially they are trying to distance themselves and cut ties.
So, Josh Green, the president doesn't want to be spending his day right now thinking about what CEOs have left his councils. He came to office to do something else. At the same time, he's there because, as Kevin said, we had this situation in Charlottesville, a tragic riot, including a death. And his response was seen as too little, too late. To what extent is this a natural extension of his campaign? You've written extensively about Steve Bannon and the role that the so-called alt-right have played in the ascension of Donald Trump. How much of this is inherent in his campaign and now his administration?
Well, Trump was in a situation somewhat like this during the campaign back in August when Hillary Clinton gave a big speech attacking Trump for his connections to Steve Bannon and the alt-right. This was about a week or so after Bannon was brought in to run the campaign. So Trump survived that and actually won the election, so it didn't hurt him. I think the difference this time around, though, is these aren't charges from a Democratic opponent. These are actual Nazis marching in the streets. People have died, so it's much more severe, and I think Trump's instinct, probably fueled by Bannon, not to apologize or not to come out and condemn these white supremacists, has clearly hurt him badly, not just with CEOs in the business community, but with most Americans.
And Margaret Talev, what is the president's strategy right now with respect to the CEOs? How important are these people to him? He's tweeted already today, you know what, the people who've left, they probably shouldn't have been there to begin with. They're grandstanders, he called them.
Right, and then you see him lashing out a little bit, expressing his anger or embarrassment at being called out on this. But look, for President Trump, having his business experience count for something, and being able to sort of parlay that is really important, and it is important to him to have the support of American business leaders on board as he heads into what will come after the August recess, which is a push to get the raising of the debt ceiling, as you know, and then some sort of, if not tax reform, at least a tax cut by the end of the year. These are people who can either amplify him or sink him, and he wants them on board as he pursues anything from trade policies to environmental policy that has at some points been controversial. You saw before this latest episode a couple of members leave around the time of the president's decision on climate change.
Right.
So these are not the first departures. The question is, will they be contained to what we've seen today? And I do think, David, that if he had not come out yesterday and said explicitly racism is evil, called out some of those groups like the KKK and Nazis, that you could be looking at an exodus. The question now is what he said yesterday essentially enough to stanch the departure of more CEOs?